Hello there, and welcome back to the neighborhood. Today, we're taking a look at the Meze Elite, thanks to Meze themselves sending in this headphone for review. I've owned both the Empyrean and Empyrean 2, but what does this mean about the Elite? Let's get into it. Let's take a look at the build quickly, as it's very similar to the original Empyrean. It's a carbon fiber headband with a shaped leather comfort strap. The strap is embossed with the word Elite in cursive, and there's a badge that says Elite at the top of the tension slider where it meets the headband. The cups of the Elite are primarily silver with black accents, and the open back grille is a black metal in a similar pattern to that of the first Empyrean. I was sent the aluminum colorway, but Meze now offers a tungsten finish as well. Meze has also been consistent with the Empyrean line in choosing dual mini XLR connections for use with all of them, but the earpads have varied significantly. Unlike the Empyrean where I enjoyed angled sheepskin earpads, the Elite makes use of flattened sheepskin earpads with an inner perforated Alcantara ring inside, bringing the driver closer to the ear as a result. The fit is therefore a bit tighter and less floppy on the head compared to the original Empyrean, but not as form-fitting and a bit looser compared to the Empyrean 2, on my head at least. In any case, it's still a relatively lightweight and comfortable to wear headphone that I can use for hours at a time, even if it might look a bit strange to wear for people that aren't into high-end headphones. A silver-colored flight case inscribed with Meze Empyrean Elite made in Romania is also provided, and Meze included a standard 3.5mm cable with the loaner unit, but I believe the Elite now comes with their nicer woven cables in lieu of this style. As such, I stuck to the Meze silver-plated copper cables that I have from my first Empyrean and Empyrean 2 for most of my testing for this review, as I found that they provided the best overall sound and most clarity with the Elite in my opinion. I utilized a Gold Note DS10 Plus and a Konus Audio Digitali 2000 as my primary DACs, and a Tron Antares signature amplifier, a Bravo Audio Ocean with a green Sylvanian 12AU7 tube installed, and a Massdrop THX AAA 789 as my primary amplifiers. Out of these sources, the Konus Audio Digitali 2000 really brought flavor to the Elite. Previously, I kinda thought that the Elite was a bit too thin sounding with sporadic imaging and an inconsistent presentation. But with the Konus Audio DAC, the Elite really dialed itself in, with musicality and flow that thrilled my ears. All of the amplifiers tested ended up sounding fantastic with this DAC, but I felt that the Elite really took to the Class A amplification a bit more than it did to the other amps, providing a more sufficiently rich and fuller sound. In other words, it's not super amp picky, but it can be amplifier picky with the wrong source, as I likely experienced prior to this review, as it requires a nice proper match to really squeeze the most out of it. With regard to sound, I'm fortunate to have owned the original Empyrean for a number of years and currently own the Empyrean 2. Knowing what the original Empyrean sounds like quite well, and being able to directly compare the Empyrean 2 to the Elite for this review, I can now see how the Empyrean line has evolved from that of a relatively bass-centric musical presentation to more of an analytical and neutral reference-like can over the course of time. The Elite is less low in focus than the original Empyrean, but boosted a bit more in the upper mid-range and presence regions. It also has a better extension in its top end as well. Even so, the Elite is still a relatively relaxed headphone in the grander scheme of things, and a joy to listen to for longer listening sessions without developing any form of fatigue. But like the original Empyrean, the Elite retains a lot of musicality and flow compared to the newer Empyrean 2. The notes of the Elite are more dynamic, rich, and rounded in their style, and further, have additional depth and complexity in comparison too. It's certainly more flavored, if you will. Still, it doesn't feel as even and consistent throughout its frequency response as the Empyrean 2 does, which ultimately feels more correct than the Elite does overall. Yet, if price was no object, I would really have a tough time deciding between the two. That is, if I could only pick one. With that said, the Empyrean 2's performance was more consistent across sources and easier to pair as well. So depending on your sources and preferences, you may prefer one over the other yourself. In terms of the sound profile, the Elite is not a super bass-heavy headphone, despite the bass being somewhat prominent in the mix. This may sound like a bit of a contradiction, but I'd call the low end balanced, yet emphasized in its dynamics. Bass details are particularly notable, but also subtle in their nature. For example, I've never heard the droning bass line on the song Hanging by a Moment by Lifehouse sound quite so sophisticated. The bass never dominates the mix, but is unmistakably evident in terms of its elocution. The texture is smooth, yet articulate. It's not the quickest or punchiest bass in the world of low end, but it's not the slowest either. Like a perfectly knitted sweater, it's comfortable to wear, yet woolly and pleasing to listen to. The mildly looming character of the low end does have an effect on the timbre, however, which is leaning warm and slightly dark, but still within what some would consider to be the range of neutrality. The midrange has a greater presence from the upper midrange forward, and the midrange below this point is more subdued. Even so, the midrange as a whole is buttery smooth and never overly aggressive. Still, this may not be a headphone for someone that's seeking a notably mid-forward presentation, as one isn't really going to get that here with the Elite. And although the Elite appears to have more of a top-end presence than the original Empyrean, the Elite is still a relatively relaxed headphone in its treble, just like its predecessor was. The Empyrean 2's top end extends a bit better, but the Elite's treble is certainly still clear and audible. With that said, the treble is notably stepped down in the mix compared to that of what I would expect from a more referenced sound. For example, brass instrumentation, snares, and hi-hat strikes are markedly toned down, which adds to this headphone's already pleasing character. Listening to James Hill's Little Viace Giasoso makes my imagination run wild. Listening to this track, I envision that this is the kind of headphone that I could enjoy at breakfast, all while sitting on a veranda taking in the Italian countryside with a cappuccino. But I will also point out that the Elite's imaging accuracy, separation, and instrument distinctiveness are unquestionably improved when driven by better performing amplification compared to more portable and budget-friendly devices. For example, I tested the Elite on the High-Dis AP80 Pro X DAP, which is a device that I normally have no qualms with its imaging, instrument distinction, or separation capabilities. But with the Elite, it showed the need for higher quality source pieces to really shine. Moreover, neither the original Empyrean nor the Empyrean 2 displayed such neediness for such a device. But on other higher-end desktop setups, like the integrated Goldnote DS10 Plus and the Konus Audio Digitale 2000 with the Tron Antares signature amplifier, the Elite's separation, instrument distinction, and imaging became refocused in a more idyllic manner. So one way to look at the Elite is that it's not really source picky so much as it is a bit of an elitist. In that way, I guess its name is rather apropos. Nevertheless, the Elite staging is rather universally nice as a whole. Per my memory, the original Empyrean was a bit wider from left to right, but the Elite displays much better depth. I described the shape of the Elite stage as circumaural, presenting an auditory picture that surrounds the ear in a rather circular manner. Notes sustain themselves well, but microdynamics, while sufficient for articulation of sounds, come across as still somewhat soft to the ear. Likewise, macrodynamics are only somewhat overemphasized, and never lead to any form of ear fatigue over longer listening sessions. With that said, in comparison to the Empyrean 2, the Elite is certainly a more engaging and rhythmically focused headphone, which I'm sure some listeners will prefer. Compared to the ZMF Verite Open, the stages are relatively similar in their overall size, scope, and general presentation, but vocals come across as larger and more focused to the ear in the Elite, leading to a greater sense of intimacy and comparison between the two headphones. The Elite is also generally less dynamic and not as punchy, and has a softer, less forceful delivery compared to the Verite. And while I would never call the Verite's frequency response spiky, it does have less flow from one note to another compared to the rhythmic character of the Elite, which seems to transition better not only over the course of an individual track, but also from one song to another as well. With that said, some will certainly prefer the Verite's more dynamic presentation, thanks in part to its dynamic driver, versus the Empyrean Elite's more delicate, planar magnetic response. In closing, I certainly enjoyed my time with the Elite more than I suspected I would have in comparison to my expectations after a few prior encounters that I had with it at shows in the past. Those auditions didn't leave me with any initial impressions of excellence, but it actually is an excellent headphone when paired with the right chain for it, even though one should be aware that it is a bit of an elitist with specific regard to sources. Overall, it splits the difference between Meze's newer Empyrean 2 and the prior Empyrean with regard to focus upon musicality. In other words, it presents as less musical compared to the original Empyrean, but more musical compared to the Empyrean 2. It's rhythmic and richly detailed, yet still concentrates on a pleasant and pleasing audiophile delivery of sound. There's a depth to the notes and overall sound of the Elite that is truly relaxing and satisfying. With the Konus Audio Digitale 2000 and Tron Antares signature headphone amplifier, it soothes both my brain and ear to listen to it for hours at a time, and I understand why it's Meze's current flagship headphone, providing the current best example of their house sound to its listeners. Thanks to Meze themselves for sending the Empyrean Elite into the channel for review and comparison. I look forward to reviewing some of their other offerings in the upcoming months as well. Thanks for making it to the end of this video and watching it in its entirety. Consider leaving a like if you enjoyed its content, and make sure that you're subscribed with the notification bell turned on so that you don't miss a future upload from yours truly. I'll also leave links in the description below for you to be able to access the channel at Instagram, Discord, the Patreon, www.intuitreviews.com, and other social media locations. And with that, I'm out for now.